The Watershed Association in Hays County gave a tough update today, revealing Jacob's Well remains closed as the spring experiences zero flow.
On the night of September 9th, two young divers, Maupin and Mark Brashier, entered Jacob's Well in Texas. After squeezing through a 15-inch opening into the cave's fourth chamber, they became trapped beneath a collapsing wall of silt and rock and never made it back out. And when one of the state's best rescue divers, Dibble, went in to recover them, the cave nearly killed him too. For decades afterward, Jacob's Well was considered too dangerous for anyone to explore its deepest passages. Then, in the early 2010s, researchers sent underwater robots deep inside it. And what their cameras found stunned everyone. Decades-old diving equipment, skeletal remains of long-lost divers, and evidence that the cave was hiding far more than anyone had imagined. So, what makes a peaceful-looking spring into one of America's deadliest dive sites? And above all, why are scientists now warning that this natural wonder could disappear forever before its deepest secrets are ever uncovered? Let's dive in. Beneath the blue, every year, more than 100,000 people visit Jacob's Well in central Texas. But surprisingly, very few know what this place really is. Because despite its name, Jacob's Well isn't really a well at all. It isn't even a lake. And it certainly isn't the peaceful pool it appears to be. It's actually the exposed entrance to one of America's most dangerous underwater cave systems, a place that has trapped experienced divers, nearly killed rescue teams, and concealed some victims for decades. And to understand how a place that looks this beautiful became so deadly, we have to go back more than 115 million years. Back then, Central Texas looked nothing like it does today. Instead of dry limestone hills, the entire region lay beneath a warm, shallow sea. Over millions of years, countless shells, coral, and other marine organisms settled onto the seafloor. Their remains were slowly compressed into enormous layers of limestone that geologists now call the Trinity Group. But solid rock alone couldn't create a place like Jacob's Well. Around 20 million years ago, powerful tectonic forces fractured the landscape along what's now known as the Balcones Fault Zone. Deep cracks spread through the limestone, creating natural pathways underground. Then rainwater did something remarkable. As it passed through the soil, it absorbed carbon dioxide and became a weak natural acid. It doesn't sound dangerous, but over millions of years, that slightly acidic water slowly dissolved the limestone, widening tiny cracks into tunnels, tunnels into chambers, and chambers into a vast underground cave system stretching nearly 6,000 feet beneath Texas. Today, Jacob's Well is connected to the Middle Trinity Aquifer, a huge underground water source beneath central Texas. But here's something most people don't know. For thousands of years, Jacob's Well wasn't just filled with water. It blasted millions of gallons to the surface under enormous natural pressure. Here's how it happened. Rainwater slowly seeped into the surrounding hills, collected deep underground, and built up under pressure. Eventually, that pressure forced the water back to the surface through the cave, creating what's known as an artesian spring. At its peak, Jacob's Well discharged between 2.5 and 4 million gallons of crystal-clear water every day, and during major floods, that flow could surge to nearly 20 million gallons a day. Early settlers even reported the water shooting almost 6 feet into the air, making it impossible for anyone to swim down into the opening. And while that powerful flow is long gone, what visitors see on the surface today is the biggest deception of all. Because beneath that calm, blue opening lies a world unlike anything most people could imagine. The cave is divided into 4 underground chambers, each deeper and more dangerous than the last. The first reaches about 30 feet below the surface, the second nearly 80 feet. The third drops beyond 100 feet through an incredibly narrow passage, and the fourth plunges more than 140 feet into a vast cavern where unstable gravel can collapse without warning. And even that isn't the end. Beyond the fourth chamber, the cave disappears into thousands of feet of flooded passages that no one knows how far they truly extend. For decades, divers risked their lives trying to map these flooded passages. Some made it back, others never did. Eventually, after several fatal accidents, one thing became clear. If researchers wanted to see what was really hidden in the deepest parts of Jacob's Well, they needed something that could go where humans no longer could. Something that didn't need to breathe, didn't panic, and could keep going in complete darkness. The drone investigation. In the early 2000s, researchers from the Jacob's Well Exploration Project launched one of the most ambitious investigations ever carried out inside the cave. They lowered a specially built underwater drone into the narrow opening, equipped with powerful LED lights, high-definition cameras, and sonar that could keep mapping even when the water turned completely cloudy. At first, everything looked almost beautiful. The drone slipped through the clear blue water of the entrance shaft, where sunlight still reached the limestone walls. But about 30 feet down, the bright opening disappeared behind it, and the cave changed completely. The first chamber narrowed into a long, sloping tunnel. The smooth limestone gave way to rough walls carved over millions of years, and the light from the surface quickly faded into darkness. Then the camera revealed one of the cave's most dangerous features, a vertical passage stretching upward. To someone lost in the dark, it looked exactly like the way out. But it wasn't. Cave divers call it the killer chimney, a dead-end crack that has trapped divers who mistook it for the exit while running low on air. The drone kept moving. Around 80 feet below the surface, it reached another obstacle, a stone restriction only about 15 inches high. A diver would have to remove scuba tanks just to squeeze through. The drone barely fit. Beyond that point, the cave opened into the infamous fourth chamber, more than 140 feet below the surface. Here, everything changed again. Solid limestone disappeared, replaced by loose gravel, broken rock, and unstable slopes that could shift without warning. Then the lights caught something unexpected. Half buried among the rocks were old pieces of diving equipment. A corroded air tank, a damaged diving mask, scraps of neoprene, and other gear left behind by divers who never made it back out. And then came the most chilling moment. Deep beneath the shifting gravel, the camera appeared to catch what looked like human skeletal remains. Suddenly, what began as a mapping mission felt like something much bigger. This wasn't just an underwater cave anymore. It looked like an underwater graveyard. And that raised an even bigger question. Who had left those objects behind? And what had happened to them deep inside Jacob's Well? To find the answer, we need to go nearly 5 decades back. The Last Descent. September 9th, 1979. Around 11:30 that night, 5 young divers from Pasadena, Texas, arrived at Jacob's Well looking for adventure. Among them were 20-year-old Kent Maupin and 21-year-old Mark Brashier, close friends determined to explore the deepest parts of Jacob's Well. Back then, this place was very different. There were no steel grates over the deeper chambers, no permits, and almost no warnings. If you wanted to dive into the cave, you simply jumped in. Kent was the more experienced diver, and Mark had learned much of what he knew from him. But neither of them had one thing that mattered most: cave diving training. Wearing bulky double steel tanks, with no guideline and no backup breathing system, they descended into the darkness. Along with them was another diver, Joe Winters. But when the group reached Chamber 3, Joe decided not to go any farther. Concerned about his remaining air and the narrow passage ahead, he stayed behind, watching the flashlight beams of Ken and Mark disappear through the 15-inch opening leading into Chamber 4. But as they squeezed through the narrow gap, their steel tanks scraped against the limestone ceiling, while their fins stirred up the thick layer of fine white silt below. Within seconds, the clear water behind them turned into a blinding cloud. Joe waited. A minute passed, then another. Growing uneasy, Joe struck his dive knife against his steel tank, sending loud metallic echoes through the cave. It was an emergency signal. If Kent and Mark could still move, they almost certainly would have heard it and responded. But no signal came back. Instead, a dense white cloud slowly drifted out through the narrow opening. With his own air running low, Joe made the hardest decision of his life, to turn around and swim back to the surface alone. Within hours, emergency crews reached Jacob's Well, but the cave had already become impossible to search. The water that was usually crystal clear had turned completely opaque, and local responders knew they weren't equipped for what waited below. There was only one man in Texas with the experience to attempt the recovery. But what happened when he entered the cave turned an already deadly accident into an even bigger nightmare. The deadly rescue. His name was Don Dibble, a former U.S. Navy diver and one of the most experienced underwater recovery specialists in Texas. If anyone had a chance of bringing Kent Maupin and Mark Brashier home, it was him. But Dibble wasn't walking into the cave unprepared. He assembled an experienced rescue team that included Calvin Turner and Paul Battaglia. Unlike the missing divers, they followed strict cave diving procedures. Extra air tanks were placed at different depths along the exit route. Then the team began the descent. They moved through the first chamber, then the second, and finally reached the narrow 15-inch restriction leading into Chamber 4. Beyond it was complete darkness. After squeezing through the opening, Dibble began searching the unstable gravel floor more than 110 feet below the surface. Time was already running out. At that depth, every breath emptied his air tank much faster than normal. But then, something went terribly wrong. Without warning, the loose gravel beneath Don Dibble shifted. Hundreds of pounds of rock slid down the slope, pinning his legs beneath the debris. The collapse blasted fine limestone sediment into the water, turning the chamber completely black. Dibble couldn't move. He couldn't see. And with every breath, the pressure gauge on his tank kept dropping. Trapped beneath the rocks, he began struggling for air. His breathing became faster and heavier. In the chaos, he started swallowing muddy cave water around his regulator, knowing he might never get out alive. Somewhere nearby, Calvin Turner realized his partner's light had vanished. Following the safety line through the darkness and feeling his way with his hands, he finally found Dibble buried beneath the collapsed gravel. Working completely blind, Turner pulled away enough rocks to free him, then immediately switched Dibble onto his own emergency air supply. It was the only reason he survived. The two men fought their way back through the narrow passages and made a rapid ascent to the surface. Moments after reaching the surface, Dibble collapsed. He was rushed to Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, suffering from severe decompression sickness. But that wasn't all. During the struggle underwater, he had swallowed so much air and muddy water that the pressure changes caused his stomach to rupture, forcing doctors into emergency surgery to save his life. The rescue mission had failed. And after nearly losing one of the best divers in Texas, many believed Kent Maupin and Mark Brashier would remain trapped inside Jacob's Well forever. But just months after surviving his medical emergency, Don Dibble returned once again. And this time, he had a far more aggressive objective. The last attempt January 1980. Don Dibble arrived at Jacob's Well once again. He put together another specialized team, prepared better equipment, and planned a much larger operation to reach Chamber 4 and continue the recovery effort. After everything that had happened, Dibble was determined not to leave Kent Maupin and Mark Brashier behind. But before the dive could happen, Kent Maupin's father came to him with a heartbreaking request. He begged Dibble to stop. Seeing Dibble nearly lose his life during the first recovery attempt was enough. He didn't want him or anyone else risking their life for his son's remains. That request changed Dibble's plan. If Kent and Mark could not be brought home, Dibble wanted to make sure no one else would ever attempt the same deadly journey. So instead of pushing deeper into Chamber 4, Dibble and his team began a different operation. At roughly 74 feet below the surface, near the entrance to the third chamber, they installed a massive underwater barrier made from heavy steel rebar grids and layers of quick-setting concrete. The deeper sections of Jacob's Well were effectively sealed, but behind that barrier, deep inside the cave, Kent Maupin and Mark Brashier remained. They were never recovered, and as the years passed, their story became more than a tragic diving accident. The missing divers, the sealed chambers, and the unexplored depths slowly became part of something much bigger. Stories and legends that had surrounded Jacob's Well for centuries. Because to the people who lived here long before the modern world, this was never just a beautiful spring. It was something far more mysterious. The Well of Legends. Around 1851, early settler William C. Winters looked into the deep blue opening for the first time and said it reminded him of the biblical Jacob's Well. The name stuck, and it's been known as Jacob's Well ever since. And if we talk about the original Jacob's Well, it still exists today near Nablus in the West Bank. According to the Bible, it was the very place where Jesus spoke to the Samaritan woman and offered what he called living water. For nearly 2,000 years, millions have considered it one of Christianity's holiest wells. The comparison made sense. Both wells seem to produce an endless supply of crystal clear water from deep underground, even during the hottest months of the year. But over time, the Texas well earned a very different reputation. As more divers disappeared beneath its surface, stories spread just as quickly as the facts. Some believed the cave was alive. Others claimed it protected something hidden beneath the limestone. But those stories didn't begin with the diving accidents. Long before anyone called it Jacob's Well, Native American tribes like the Tonkawa, Lipan Apache, and later the Comanche looked at this place very differently. To them, that deep blue opening wasn't just a spring. It was a gateway between the human world and the spirit world. So they didn't come here just out of curiosity. They believed this was a place that demanded respect, and anyone who ignored that could face terrible consequences. Some legends even went a step further, claiming there was a living presence somewhere in the darkness below, watching over the well itself. Whether those stories are true or not, no one knows. What we do know is even more unsettling. More than 6,000 feet of underwater passages have already been mapped beneath Jacob's Well. But researchers believe the cave goes much deeper, into sections that neither human divers nor even modern underwater drones have been able to fully explore. But here's the irony. After everything Jacob's Well has hidden for centuries, the greatest mystery today isn't what's still waiting below. It's whether this famous spring will survive at all. The Dying Spring. For generations, Jacob's Well was considered a permanent spring. It flowed almost every day of the year, sending between 2.5 and 4 million gallons of water into Cypress Creek every single day. But in 2000, something happened that had never been recorded before. Jacob's Well stopped flowing. It happened again in 2008, then again in 2021, 2022, and 2023. The famous swimming hole has now remained closed for multiple summers because there simply isn't enough water. Scientists say this isn't caused by one single problem. Years of severe drought have left the Trinity Aquifer with far less rainfall than it needs to recharge. At the same time, rapid population growth across Hays County has led to thousands of new groundwater wells pulling water from the very same underground system that feeds Jacob's Well. The result is simple. More water is being pumped out than nature can replace, and the damage doesn't stop at the well. Jacob's Well is the source of Cypress Creek. When the spring stops flowing, the creek begins to dry, native fish disappear, ancient cypress trees lose their water, and the entire ecosystem downstream starts to suffer. For more than 3 decades, organizations like the Watershed Association, together with Hays County and local conservation agencies, have worked to protect Jacob's Well. They've preserved hundreds of acres around the spring, stopped major development projects, and established groundwater management zones based on years of scientific research. But their biggest obstacle isn't science, it's the law. Under Texas's rule of capture, local groundwater districts have only limited power to stop excessive pumping. They can issue fines and restrictions during droughts, but in many cases, they can't simply shut off large groundwater users. As a result, millions of gallons can continue to be pumped from the same aquifer the well depends on. And if nothing changes, scientists warn that future generations may never know Jacob's Well as the mysterious, powerful spring that drew explorers from around the world. Instead, they may remember it only as the place where one of Texas's greatest natural wonders quietly disappeared. So here we are, a place that survived millions of years, inspired ancient legends, challenged generations of explorers, and refused to reveal all of its secrets, is now fighting for its own survival. Who do you think should be held accountable for what's happening to Jacob's Well today? And what do you believe is the most important step to protect it before it's too late? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you want more incredible stories like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.